That's
Done.
change.
Move over. Well, I mean,
I don't know where Todd is.
Hi.
Tom Borden. I'm Betsy Johnson.
Nice to meet you.
I told him where. Wherever you want. Okay, is this better?
Yeah, no, this is much better.
Okay.
I just felt like, church.
No,
where
I know,
it's
I
in
know.
front of the back.
I
No one
know.
wants to sit in front.
We're backseat people.
Well, I just want to introduce ourselves. We're the Lents Neighborhood Livability Association. And I don't even know how we connected, because it was like somebody connected to you, then they connected to us, and then they said, well, we don't have the time for all this, so they left it to us to carry the ball.
Cool.
So-
Well, there's
so-
about 6 degrees of separation from everybody in Oregon.
Yeah.
My father told me ages ago when I got into elected life, before you call somebody in Oregon an SOB, find out who their brother-in-law is.
Yeah, exactly.
So,
Exactly.
Anyway.
So welcome,
Thank
and
you.
thank you.
Are you guys the board? Because I presume that there are more than just you guys that are completely fed up and dissatisfied with what's going on. They're
We're a
probably all-
representation
okay.
of Lents.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, I'm not even in the Lents Livability Association, but I live in Lents and have a vested interest in Lents in Portland in general, and we get everyone who lives in Lents gets to see kind of up close and personal.
Yeah, you're ground zero.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I just wanted to say it for the benefit. There's some reporters from not around here, and knowing what I know about Lents, I imagine that for each one of you, there are 25 people standing behind you saying, figure out who's going to fix this.
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So,
I was supposed to moderate the questions, but I'm going to leave it up to you guys. That's how I like to run our meetings, and that's how I like to run it, so that people have a voice.
cool.
So if you, I guess, just raise your hand and you can
Yeah,
call
but
on
let's do
Betsy.
introductions just quickly.
Okay.
So,
My name is Lydia Masad, born and raised in Portland, actually in this area. Went to David Douglas High School. We have a business, a restaurant in downtown Portland that we've had for 33 years, and we refuse to move.
Alamir,
Yes.
cool.
And I also have a nonprofit called Feeding Kids in Our Backyard. So,
Oh, I've seen you on the TV.
yes, thank you.
Joseph Alcall. I'm a retired dentist in Portland, born and raised in Portland. Very concerned about the area and how it's become safety and the homeless issue, and how we're going to attack this problem, because it's a very big problem.
Okay.
Juanita Swartwood, I'm a resident. My husband Tom, we live in Lents. I represent a safe community within Lents, about 20 homes, and we are connected, and I'm a retired person from the city of Portland and have lived in Lents for 21 years now.
I'm Tom. You know that.
My name is Mary. I live in Lents, and I'm really unhappy with the camping, legal camping, and the open use of drugs and mentally ill people committing crimes, and they don't get arrested or prosecuted at all. I've lived in Lents, owned a home for 26 years, but lived in the neighborhood for a long time.
I'm Todd Littlefield, born and raised in Portland. 30 years as a realtor, real estate developer, invested, sacrificed everything in Portland, invested in Portland. We have absolute lawlessness. There's no consequences. This woke ideology must be taken down.
Well said.
My name is John Spinnett. I'm born and raised in Portland, lived in Lents. We own multiple businesses in Lents. My family's owned for almost 50 years.
What kind of businesses?
We have 3 automotive businesses, and I also have a handful of real estate, including in Lents and throughout Portland. And I'm also representing the Lents Business Association. I'm on the board.
Cool.
Shar Penny, I'm Secretary Treasurer of the nonprofit Lents Neighborhood Livability Association.
I'm Gary Sargent. I'm a third-generation motor vehicle dealer located at dealerships on 82nd Street, and in the 1980s we located a second dealership in the heart of Lents on 102nd and Foster Road. We've been inundated with theft, inundated with unsafe conduction of how we can conduct business. And, you know, it's out of control. And the district attorneys, they aren't doing anything about it.
Some of them are.
Well,
Not in this area. I just didn't want a blanket indictment of DAs. I think Kevin Barton in Washington County is doing a hell of a good job. Mike Schmidt, not so much.
Tom Borden, I live in Lents. I live right at Steel and the Southeast Steel and the multi-use path. My wife she founded the Lents Steel Street Bridge project, which is basically took a graffiti and garbage strewn bridge and now has painted it with murals, and it's really become pretty great. But we live right there. I work down in Southeast Industrial. We have a cold storage warehouse, so I've kind of seen it on both ends. And as someone who for years used to say that I liked, despite all the problems, I liked the fact that I lived in a city that erred on the side of compassion. I've now realized that this is absolutely not compassionate. I mean, first and foremost, for the people living out there, I mean, it's terrifying for my kids to walk to school, and they literally just have to walk. They don't even have to cross the street. They just walk across the bridge to Lent school right across that bridge.
So true.
So it's terrifying for the kids, but it's even more terrifying for these people that are out there, and every single night they have absolutely no safety. So it's not compassionate to let people to live under those conditions. And it just, I've now realized that safety is the very basic human need that everyone needs, and that goes for everyone. And with the policies that have been pursued are just making that impossible. So that's crazy.
I don't know if you guys would object to signing a sign-in sheet so we can all find each other again, and I'll make sure you get a copy of it so you.
I have all the information.
Oh, if you do, that's great. I just
Yeah.
want to be able to find people
Yeah.
again if questions
Yeah.
come up. Part of the value of these meetings is the connectivity that comes out of them, and I might have a question later that your expertise could help inform.
I'll send it to Erica.
Cool. Well, I'm happy to get right into your questions. I'm happy to do a little quick introduction of myself. It's your meeting. You tell me what you want to do.
Why don't you give us a little introduction?
I'm a native Oregonian. I grew up in Central Oregon. My father was in the timber business, owned mills over in Central Oregon, went away to school, came back. I was in law school at Lewis and Clark. I was on the night program, so I was there for 4 years. I worked in the Multnomah County courts for those 4 years, which gave me an interesting taste of what was going on in sort of Portland's, this is back in the 70s, criminal underworld at that time. Working in the jail left me with a vocabulary that would make a pirate blush. By the time I graduated from law school, which was the day the Trailblazers won the championship, I knew I didn't want to practice law, so I fell back on a skill that my father had taught both my sister and me how to fly. And so I started a helicopter company. I had been flying commercially for a while, still while I was in law school, and had been invited to fly a demonstration team. It was the United States helicopter team, flew in what was then the Soviet Union. That tells you how long ago it was. So came back, started a helicopter company. We did all sorts of things. Our little company motto was your wallet, we haul it. And so we took bad bears out of the national parks. We changed the latrine on Mount Rainier. We fought fire. We were the prime contractor to the U.S. Geological Survey on Mount St. Helens. I flew the day of the eruption. We were out of our minds, but that's ancient history. I did that for 20 years, had the opportunity to sell a helicopter company, ran for the House, was elected 3 times to the House. 10 days into my 3rd term, the senator was appointed to a paid position with the state, couldn't keep her Senate seat. So 23 county commissioners, 5 counties unanimously appointed me to take her seat, and I've earned election to that seat from 2005. I rose to be the head of the Budget Writing Committee on the Senate side, the Joint Ways and Means Committee, but in December of last year realized I couldn't mount a full-throated run for governor and still take care of the constituents that I was honored and privileged to take care of the same way that I always had. So with considerable reluctance and regret, I resigned from the Senate to pursue becoming Oregon's next governor. So that's pretty much my story, and I'm sticking to it. I am particularly glad to be able to come out here and talk to you guys and try to soldier through your questions, because this community has been ground zero for way too long. I think you've taken an abusive amount of the hit of all of the issues: homelessness, crime, drugs. And so I'm happy to just get right into your questions. And that you've given me some of them here, but if somebody's got something else, fair game.
I have a question.
As the chair, you get to start.
Thank you. My only question was, can you, as governor, order an emergency order to get some of this cleaned up?
Yes and no.
Okay.
On the state highways, yes, because ODOT, the Oregon Department of Transportation, is part of the executive branch. And in fact, on the first day, I tell ODOT, load up the dump trucks and the paint wagons. We're coming up here and we're going to take this crap off the sides of the roads, and we're going to paint the signs so that visitors from out of town can know which exit to take and how to get to, the freeway to go to Seattle. One of the meetings that I went to this morning was up in Washington, and even Washington roads don't look as crappy as Oregon roads do. And I guess I subscribe personally to the theory that if there's a broken window and nobody fixes the window, that pretty soon there are more.
Yes.
And that was borne out by the second meeting that I went to that was out by the airport, and there are discarded RVs everywhere.
Yeah.
One of the guys, all I've done this morning is talk to pissed off people. Everybody's pissed off. And that's the whole premise of my candidacy. I think I've got the capabilities, the courage, and the history. I know where a lot of the dead bodies are buried in Salem. I think I'm the only guy that can actually effectuate change, because I don't care. I'm running not for miscongeniality or a stepping stone to another office. I want to fix stuff. As a native Oregonian, I am embarrassed about how this place looks. I'm afraid. The restaurant that we were in this morning had the doors ripped out last night. And one of the people at the breakfast, wife with her 3 young kids, was in a parking lot in a mall area, and a car came right up next to her, and she was so distracted by the car and making sure their kids were okay, she took her eye off her purse that was hanging over her shoulder. The guy grabbed her purse, and in it was everything every woman knows is in her purse your whole life. And so he's furious. He comes from a very prominent Vancouver family, and he's furious. We've had 2 dead bodies near our office where we're running the campaign within the last month. I've had 4 windows broken. People are sick to death of it. And what they're really sick of is politicians all trying to have a win for their team. But as I started to say, I'm not running for miscongeniality. Just join with me for a second and imagining a governor that would say, I won't sign a major piece of legislation into law. I won't sign a budget into law. I won't make appointments to boards and commissions unless there's bipartisan support. It would be absolutely transformational. Then you don't have the R's and the D's stacking up a win-loss record. You've got people that are willing to do stuff.
Next question. Would you repeal, or whatever the word is, Measure 110?
Hell yes. Now, it's more complicated than that.
Right.
The voters of Oregon got fooled.
Right.
I know.
Yes,
And they passed a wolf in sheep's clothing. And so I worked against it, I voted against it, but shame on Oregonians for passing that. I can't, as governor, repeal it. It was passed by the people of Oregon. I would ask the legislature to re-refer it, and if they didn't re-refer it, I'd lead the petition drive to ask Oregonians, with an informed election, an honest election, to take a look at the functional effect of legalizing hard drugs in this state. Downtown Portland's become an open-air drug market.
Oh, thank you.
Dylan, this kid in the back of the room who helps me, was parked by U.S. Bank yesterday waiting for me to come out of an office there, and had to move. There are guys doing open-air drug deals with great big long knives, and Dylan said, I just didn't feel safe.
Yeah, I watched 2 young women. There's a bus stop up on Flavel, Southeast 92nd. I was stopped at the light. They had their little skateboards. They were no more than 14 years old, and they looked at what was around across the way, and they could not pass because there were homeless people doing open drugs. There were about 4 to 5 men, and one girl pointed and said, please go around this other way. They had to walk into the street.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear the emotion in your voice.
Well, the future, of Oregon is our children.
Yep.
And if we don't do something about it now, our future doesn't look good.
Well, let me just go down through a couple of the law and order things I would do. First of all, come after ballot measure 110. And I've listened to one of my opponents say, oh no, we've got to give it a chance to work.
Yeah.
We've got to give it a chance to work. Well, this is once again the state of Oregon failed to get a program launched timely. And then I'm quite curious, and I just haven't taken the time to find out who are the beneficiaries of the money that we've already pushed out. We have so little accountability. I want to know that the institutions or the companies that we're giving money to actually have a proven track record.
Absolutely.
And then we've got to have some measurables. If you're going to quit doing drugs, is it for 2 hours, 2 days, 2 months, 2 weeks, 2 years? Do you get a job? And who keeps those metrics? And how do we know that spending hundreds of millions of dollars has actually moved the dial? So the first thing is to repeal that ballot measure and get some accountability. Then the other drug area that we haven't talked about yet here is what's happening in Southern Oregon, where the cartels have basically taken over the counties. Any flat spot, now they're putting hoop houses on and growing drugs. And there's a paucity of water, so anybody with a 4,000-gallon water tender goes down and sucks water out of whatever water impoundment there is. And I can sure as hell promise you they're not worrying about the ecological values as they're sucking the gravel out of the bottom of a pond or a river. Pesticides squirted all over the place, people basically in bondage doing work in those fields. Open murders, it's a mess. So I would want somebody that answered directly to the governor's office, not all of this, but somebody who's accountable and has the trust and confidence of law enforcement down in that neck of the woods. The next thing is repeal Kate's appointments to parole board. Stop letting these criminals out of the penitentiary. Our streets are already unsafe, and she has let out, by some counts, 1,000 rapers, murderers, drug addicts. That would stop. 2 of those cases I know very well, and I've met the mom of a 17-year-old pregnant girl who was savagely murdered. My staff has asked me to stop going into the details when there are cameras around. Let's just put it savagely murdered. And Kate let that guy out about a month ago. Outrageous. So you stop letting those people out, and then start calling out the DAs that won't prosecute.
Absolutely.
Investigate, indict, prosecute, consequences. Stop letting people out of jail if you've knocked the windows out of stores downtown, you've terrorized people. There are going to be consequences.
Have you checked out that group that's actually getting bail for those people?
Yeah, I think that's outrageous. Margaret Carter is a good friend of mine, former head of the Democrats in Oregon. She's cut an ad supporting me that's up on the TV right now. And the woman that was killed after being bailed out by that group was very close to her. Don't get Margaret started about how pissed off she is about that. Okay. So that's sort of on crime. Did I answer your questions, or did I get on such a rant that I wandered around in the woods without answering your questions?
Well, you sort of did, but you addressed Measure 10 and what you can do with that. What about like the DAs or the Southern Oregon crime you're talking about, or just the wokeness in our schools? That's got to be tackled, or our kids are going to they're going to grow up and they're not going to have any skills, and they're going to be social justice warriors, and that's all they're going to have. And they're going to hate their parents, and they're going to hate the country. So.
Okay, I mean, you bundled a whole lot of stuff.
I know.
Let's try to.
How to get it out.
You know what's interesting is when people are as unhappy as you guys are, it just sort of comes out. This is not dissimilar from a lot of other meetings I've had with really cranky people who have just had it.
Well, if you dissect, you just take one part of it. What are you going to do about in your advertisement on the web that you're going to call out these district attorneys that are not prosecuting? What exactly do you mean by call out, and what governor's powers, if you will you use to call them out?
Sure.
Yeah.
Let's start with the fact that DAs are elected. They are answerable to their voters. And so in some cases, the Attorney General, if our Attorney General is willing, could take over some prosecutions at a gubernatorial request. But The DAs are publicly elected and answerable to their own voters. And as you've seen in San Francisco, where there was a recall and an active recall underway in another California city. I don't know if there's a recall measure underway in Portland. I just am unaware of that. But the governor's office can do a lot. The governor can help do the news cycle. Look at how many news people are in here right now, and I'm no part of a governor yet. So the governor can affect the news cycle. The governor can convene. If somebody gets an invitation from the governor's office to come and have a little chit-chat with law enforcement and other affected people, generally they come. And I think that using the bully pulpit of the governor's office to continue to point to the failure of any consequences in Portland for bad behavior is a very powerful tool. The other thing is that I think that the governor can, I don't think, I know, that the governor, properly motivated, can get to other legislators. I can't think of a legislator, a Republican or a Democrat, who wants to come back to their district and say, on my watch, this happened. And there will be those that will defend Mike Schmidt and say that he's, trying to rehabilitate and this is the new, softer approach to crime and that that's a good thing. I'll bet you there are a lot more people that represent your point of view that say we're sick of being terrorized and we want our streets back.
Well, we've got to, and not to shortcut
I'll come back to you.
Your questions at all, but she
These are
happened
important.
she happened to touch on one of my actual questions. It was how you're going to call them out. And there's unethical conduct. And in my opinion, the district attorney here in Portland, Oregon, has unethical conduct by not prosecuting these individuals, getting the funding for a 500-bed jail that we have, that when they reach 250, they won't let anybody else in or they start releasing. Now we've got even a mental hospital that just released, 100 or whatever, because they for trial, they have to pass some kind of psychological test before they can have trial. Well, if they haven't passed that test, why are they being back released into the general population? These are unsafe conditions that, as a governor, I would think that there has to be some powers, some pressure besides the news media, because the news media has been reporting Mike Schmidt's blunders and letting people out and not prosecuting and letting these stores be overrun by shoplifters. I myself have experienced countless times walking into Home Depot over here on right up the street, and they're walking out with shopping carts full of tools. And it's the other night we were at Target. I'm watching a guy walk out with the tags on a whole handful of new clothes. And I had to almost stop myself. My wife grabbed my arm and she says, "What's the matter?" And I said, "That guy just walked out here with the store." I had to stop, and my reaction would have been to try to stop that guy. Okay? But then I had to stop and think, you know what? These are multi-million-dollar businesses that can't, because of fear of being sued, by stopping a shoplifter. And that, if I was governor, that would be where I would want to start, is to get legislation that would allow businesses, if they have an anti-theft patrol, if you will, okay, that if they're acting within the same arms of what is required by a police officer, no excessive abuse, whatever, or excessive force, to stop them at the door, and if they fight, well, then we got a different situation. But they should be able to arrest those people and put them in jail. It's theft. It's absolute theft. And they're writing it off, and guess what? We're all having to pay higher prices.
Yeah, 100%.
Everything, everywhere I turn around, everything's going up. You know why? Because they're finally realizing that, you know what? Let's just raise it to the consumer, the taxpayer, and those are the kind of, I was raised with the thought by my parents that, every action gets a reaction, right? And then action speaks volumes. So in my opinion, Betsy, you need to speak volumes. And you need to lay down exactly what you are going to do to stop these top volume issues that we, the neighborhood association, are experiencing from the homelessness. We've got all these. This morning I'm watching on Channel 6. They're having a money drive for the Portland Mission,
The gospel mission?
Gospel Mission,
Yeah.
thank you. I would think, and they were around in the 70s and have been there on Skid Row, if you will, downtown Portland. And why aren't they receiving these monies that are for homeless people? And they've got to go to the public and ask for more. What's wrong with that picture? What I've seen is that there's a large number of nonprofits. They create their board, pulling down $100,000+ a year, and then they hold little deals downtown Portland, Pioneer Square. There was over 100 nonprofits down there asking for volunteers. Okay, so they get the minions to do it for free, and the bosses are collecting all the money.
Right.
Now you figure out how to change that dynamic, and that's the biggest issue. We're all on the same page
grant
here.
money, Gary.
I understand it's grant money, but when you and I'm not against grant money if it's going to the right place.
And if it's
and as you mentioned earlier, in accountability, they have to have a track record.
Well, let me jump up and follow up. Do you mind, you asked it. Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
yeah.
There is no shortage of money in dealing with homelessness. And unlike the two guys that are running against me, I've actually been doing something about it. How many of you are familiar with Wapato?
Yes.
Yes.
We were there when you were there
I know,
opening it.
that's where I've seen you
Yeah.
from. For the benefit of the people who don't know about Wapato, $65 million prison built with public money never housed one person one night because, oops, we forgot to pass an operating levy. So that building sat empty for 20 years. I'm pleased to report that it was built so stoutly that when we reanimated it, it came back to life fairly early. I mean, the plumbing was okay and stuff like that. So I'd gone to law school with Jordan Schnitzer and knew him pretty well. And when I found out that he'd bought it, I was aware of a not-for-profit on the coast called Helping Hands that was doing a very good job in helping people come into sober lifestyles. And it housed them and got them jobs and did wraparound services. So I called Jordan and I said, before you scrape that thing, would you consider giving the kitchen equipment to Helping Hands? Little did I know that Multnomah County had denuded that building.
Yes.
They took the toilet paper out of the dispensers. So it was stripped bare. And the usable stuff was gone. But serendipitously, Jordan and Alan Evans, who runs Helping Hands, met each other, liked each other, and it ended up with Jordan not demolishing the building, but giving it to Helping Hands. I went out and raised a couple of million philanthropic dollars to begin the conversion from a jail to a place that didn't look like a jail. And if you haven't been out there recently, you should go out.
I know, we need to go back out.
Oh.
They're having a concert
Oh.
today.
It's
a
Isn't it
wonderful
today?
facility.
it has my heart.
It is a wonderful place.
Yeah.
It has my heart, it has my personal wallet, and it has my husband on their board. But we're just finishing the daycare center so that the women can work. But we have taken an endless amount of shit from
Yeah.
the county and the
Oh, yeah.
city because we were considered high barrier. And so by high barrier, we expect people to remain sober and clean.
Duh.
We expect them to have a job, and we'll help facilitate getting them a job. We want them not to challenge other people's sobriety by bad behavior. We want them to contribute to their room and board, a modest amount of money. It's far enough away from town that the local corner drug dealer isn't right there to try to entice somebody who's fighting to stay clean and sober. The criticisms were it's too far out of town, no bus will go out there. We got TriMet to change the bus schedule. It doesn't have internet. Well, it just bristles with technology now. I mean, they do broadcasts and TV reports all the time. It doesn't have a library. So I said to Alan Evans, who runs Helping Hands, when you were a raving meth addict and you were sleeping under the Burnside Bridge, freezing your butt off, did you worry a lot about a book of poetry? Alan said, no, that was pretty low on his priority list. And so Helping Hands is working, and they're finally getting a little support from the city and the county. But there's an organization that works, and instead of coming in beside it to get people off, they wanted to fight Helping Hands because everybody is focused on the money. They're not focused on getting people off the street.
Absolutely.
We need to start with an inventory of how many people are really on the street and what took them there. Is it poverty? Is it domestic abuse? Is it mental illness? Is it drugs? It could be any of those things. And then figure out how do you start solving those. And that's the one thing that Helping Hands does, is that we're putting in wraparound services so that you don't send somebody from one door to the next door to the next door to amalgamate the services that they need. They can get it all in one place. If you're a vet and you've been promised and earned benefits, let's get the county veteran service officer there to help you facilitate getting those. So Helping Hands is working. I am extraordinarily proud of being part of Helping Hands. And if you haven't been out there, I would commend it for you to go.
Concert today, Mary?
What'd you say?
There's a concert, I think, today.
Is it today at 3?
I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. We're
Well,
taking you, Mary. What are
Yes.
you talking about? You're
It's
not sure.
151,000 square
I think
feet
it's
of
Saturday.
hope.
Yeah.
Yes.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it is.
Awesome.
It is.
facility.
Wonderful program.
So we could put those facilities all over the state
Sure
to
we
try
could.
to help.
But in my view, and if I'm governor, it comes with the caveat that they can't just be high-rise using. If we're serious about helping, we help. You don't facilitate. You don't just build a new building so somebody's clean and dry so they can shoot up.
Yeah.
Is it going to be expensive? Yes. Do we need accountability? Yes. Do
Well,
we?
all the nonprofits that are getting money, you could siphon that money off all those nonprofits doing nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And people are going to get sick of the pleas from the not-for-profits. I mean,
Yeah.
we haven't moved the dial on the tents, and that's the
Yeah.
measure that people in Lents or people in downtown or frankly people in Astoria or Tillamook or any place else, that's going to be their measure of success. Are there fewer tents?
What I'm so aggravated about, and this is all fine and good, but if people don't want to be clean and sober, I'm tired of them living on my street. I'm sorry.
That's right.
I pay thousands of dollars, yet I'm not compassionate. I feed kids all day long. I have a nonprofit. 100% of the dollars from my nonprofit goes to feeding hungry kids in foster care, kids left behind. Nobody is talking about foster care right now.
No.
Let's talk about the foster care system. Let's talk about DHS. Talk about broken money and dollars. But I'm sick, we're sick of living on the top of Mount Scott our whole life. Our taxes have risen through the
Right.
roof.
Through the roof.
Our
Right.
streets are shit, excuse my language. I go through a street and every drug addict flips me off. They're taking up the entire street and they're not homeless, they're drug addicts. They choose
right.
to be there. We are not forcing them to be there. They choose to do their drugs. They choose lawlessness. They choose to be in the street. Yet if I say this, my windows for our business in downtown Portland will be broken because I don't have compassion. I have a lot of compassion. I want our schools to be better. I want our education to be better. I want hunger to stop. I want people to have resources. But if they choose not to, they need to be taken out of where we live. And I'm tired of it.
Put them in the West Hills.
Put them anywhere. I don't care. And
Well, Lens has been a dumping ground for that.
yes, and 75% of the people, I don't know if that's a fact, but that's a statistic that we've heard, are not from here. So, hey, Oregon's even $700 a month and free phone. Come on down. So I'm tired of it. I'm tired of being the taxpayer, but yet we are looked at as criminals. I'm a criminal, but we're actually the victims, and
We're
the criminals are the
uncompassionate.
victims, and I'm tired of it.
Yeah.
I just got flipped off with a gun and a machete in the middle of the street. Sorry, I'm not changing my route because they want to take over the street. I'm not letting them take over our city. People tell us, move from downtown Portland. I'm like, I'm not moving. We've been there for 33 years. They need to move.
Well,
I'm so tired of it. And you know what? Yes, people say this, oh, we can do this. Well, do it then. I'm sick of it. There's enough people here. Let's do. Stop fighting against each other. All of us can make change in this room. But there's so many barriers. You can't do this, you can't do it. Why can't you? Yes, we can. We all are standing up for the same thing. We all feel the same thing. Let's work together on committees and get it done.
Well, you need a governor that would stand beside you and espouse exactly that same attitude. That's me. Tina passed a law that makes it easier for tent cities to proliferate.
Yes.
We have got to get those tents off the street. The interesting thing is you said that you feed people. Jordan Schnitzer, who's made a financial accommodation for Wapato, just had 4 of his buildings vandalized downtown.
Yes.
And so the very people that are providing the compassion end up being victimized by the...
These are targeted hits.
Oh, I don't doubt that.
100%.
These are targeted.
100%.
These
Yeah.
are targeted.
Yeah, I don't doubt that. Well, a couple of other things that I would do, because you've asked for specifics, is I put as much, as a budget writer for the state, I put as much money into OSP's budget as I could cram into it and still get the votes to pass it, because budgets have to pass with votes. And there is a distinctly anti-cop element at the legislature. And so I packed up OSP. And that's why in the 90 professional law enforcement people that are backing me are the 4 previous heads of OSP. I don't think that's ever happened before, to have that level of support from OSP. I would fully reactivate, and using state funds to do it, the gang enforcement. You've got to get past the city council to welcome those gangs, those gang intervention officers. But when there are enough neighborhoods, and I think it's growing, that represent you guys. I met with a group just like this the other day in downtown that live in the Pearl. And the plan now is to stick one of these safe rest villages in the Pearl. What little I know about the safe rest villages is they don't have an agreement with the operator to actually enforce any discipline. So you're just building houses for people that are using. If they could have a contract with the operator that said you can give somebody who's abusing drugs or alcohol the boot, you could enforce a curfew, you could do this, that, and the other thing. But those people in the Pearl represent a slightly different demographic from you, but they are equally angry about having something done to them rather than with them. The hearings haven't been transparent. They just end up with, poof, you've got a safe rest village. Or, surprisingly enough, downtown is starting to get cleaned up a little. Where do you think some of those guys are going? Like maybe right here.
Right here.
And because of the screwed up form of Portland's governance, it's like this. I was trying to get a chop shop off of about the last quarter mile of a driveway into a business that was either just inside my old Senate district or just outside my old Senate district. I worked for months on that. Got promises from the mayor what was going to happen, and then every time it didn't, he blamed it on Joanne Hardesty because we've got this weird arrangement in Portland. Now, make no mistake, I don't think the new charter is a solution. It's already broken. Having more of them, I don't think is going to make it less broken. But if I voted in Portland, I would vote no on that. That whole system is just screwed up. But we've got to get away from this. And the voters have got to hold people accountable. This election is going to decide whether Hardesty comes back. But you couldn't move these broken down RVs that were being used as automobile chop shops because of the city's rules about that somebody's habitation. Hardesty wouldn't send Peabot out to get those out of there. Finally, we got an agreement. So I drove down there the other day to see if the agreement was holding, and to my astonishment, it is. The chop shop is gone. Now, by virtue of this being on the TV, they'll probably all be back. But anyway, what I'm trying to do is empathetically say to you guys, it's not just Lents, it's the Pearl, it's all sorts of places in and around Portland where Oregonians have just said, enough is enough. We can't live like this anymore. We want our streets back. Restaurateurs want to be able to invite people into Portland, or you've got restaurateurs out here that want to feel safe if they come out for an evening.
I was surprised about the Pearl because we were involved with PSAC, which was downtown, and a lot of the businesses were involved with that group, and I think they still exist. They're just not as vocal as they used to be. But originally we were going to a lot of meetings downtown with the Downtown Neighborhood Association, the Pearl Neighborhood Association, and they were the compassionate ones that said we need to help the homeless, and they've totally turned around on that point, because we just went down there a few weeks ago and helped them clean with We Heart Seattle. And it's funny how those attitudes have changed when they started getting hit with what Lents has been dealing with for years. It makes me laugh, because now you've got Laurelhurst speaking out, the Pearl speaking out, downtown speaking out, and before it was always these meetings where they'd have all this chalk on the board about how we need to be more compassionate and get them service, get them clothing and food, and they're done with all that. It's just interesting when it hit them.
Well, that's good. It was in Lents.
Yeah,
Everything was good.
yeah,
Yeah, everything's good. Then it comes to their front door, and then they feel like us.
yeah.
Why does it have to be like that? You don't trust us? You don't believe us?
Well, or it's such a complete disrespect of you.
Yeah.
That's,
Well, why does it work in other counties? I mean, you go 3 streets over
Yeah.
to Clackamas County, and it's clean,
different world.
safe. You go to Washington County, you're in a different,
World.
in a totally different world. We pay just as much taxes, if not more,
No,
in
you
Multnomah
pay
County
more.
than anybody
pay a
else.
lot
So why
more.
aren't we
Property
getting
taxes or
what everybody else has? That's what I don't
The
understand.
criminal element knows where
Yes.
that boundary line
It's
is.
the
and they
people
know
you
the cops
elected
will
to
not
run the
check.
show.
I didn't elect them. Trust me, I'd run
People
them.
we
if I
elected
could.
to run the show.
I mean, what you were saying dovetails into the question that I sent to Shar, which is, everyone in Portland, and I know people that live all over the city, and to me, it's the number one issue on everyone's mind, which is, homelessness, public safety, and just how that's just gone so downhill recently. So if you assume that if people in Portland assume that the people that they've just elected genuinely want to fix the city, regardless of what their motivations are, how does a governor actually push them and lead them in a way where where you're still working within the limitations of what you can do as governor in terms of like what actually happens on the ground in the city of Portland, but how do you lead and push them, the elected officials here, to actually get stuff done? Because to me, I'm a firm believer in the idea that if you attack the problem at the root of it, which to me is people not having a place to live. So if because I run in and I talk to homeless people in our neighborhood all the time. The stories they tell me, the actual homeless, the stories they tell me of just the savagery that happens every night within their community, is crazy. So it's like, how do you to me, like, if Portland has been talking for years about giving everyone, providing housing. We're going to provide housing. We're going to pick people up in motels. Or the reality is, the jail and helping hands. That's great, but that's not going to house everyone. How do you free up and actually get the city to start using land that the city has control over to build, tent communities that are emergency, communities that they build that are policed, so that, like you said, they can enforce general laws of, no, you're not going to be able to savage each other within this community. You're not going to be able to do drugs. You're not going to, continue to let the criminal element kind of run the show, which is, I think, what's happened in Portland is, there's a homeless community out there that is homeless because they can't find housing. But then the criminal element that has now taken over that community is just running the show, and they know that
There's no consequence.
yeah, they know that there's no consequences. So, as governor, how do you take your jurisdiction over the whole state? How do you actually get things on the ground in the city to actually happen?
Well, I can close my eyes and envision the first testimony in front of the Portland City Council with a whole room full of people from Lents and the Pearl and Laurelhurst and all of the other communities that are suffering from this. Because as an elected official, I can tell you there is nothing more potent to make a point than a whole room full of pissed off people testifying before an adjudicatory body. So go down and I firmly believe, and I've said this in all sorts of public venues, Oregon cannot succeed if Portland fails. And
Yeah.
Portland right now, by every measure, is failing.
Yeah, totally.
A mess.
And I think that there is a state interest in making sure that this city works.
Yeah, of course.
It's holding elected people accountable. It is asking, just as we talked about, I can't affect the election of the DA, but to make a very public statement about, and I don't care who the DA is, but the need for the DA to be the top cop in the area, investigate, indict, prosecute. We have to have accountable police to establish that level of credibility, and I would insist on people coming out of the academy being accountable and working with Oregonians. Serve and protect means something to me. So I think there are a variety of things, but there are limitations to what the governor can do. I would quibble with you a little bit in not downselling the ability of the governor to make a case. Where governors have been cheerleaders for whatever the activity is, I think it can make a huge difference. And I keep hearing from people who have moved to Austin, Texas, for example. The governor has told state agencies, go work with these new businesses that are coming in. Help them be pathfinders through our system. I mean, help provide paths through our system. We have had a governor who hasn't been very interested in economic development, and I certainly think that deteriorating neighborhoods affect economic development. You can't keep or retain businesses. And for those of you that have been in the hospitality business, the last 2 years have just been brutal, with inconsistent orders coming out of the Oregon Health Authority. You're open one day, you go out and buy a bunch of food, you're closed the next day, and you're trying to find out who to give this food to. You guys have been irreparably damaged. We got to figure out how to get a workforce back, because I bet you've had trouble finding people for the front and the back of the house. But having a governor as a cheerleader for communities and for economic development and for opportunity and for schools that are teaching our kids, to go back to your point, that last set of test scores certainly demonstrated, but we've been on a slide for a long, long time. But I have lamented the fact that we don't know what 2 years of forced out of the classroom has done to our kids' mental, emotional, and academic health. We now have seen the test scores. We know how they've deteriorated academically. We don't know what has happened to them mentally and emotionally. I would load up the schools at this point with public school teacher nurses, with mental health experts, with school resource officers. These are the trusted adults that a kid could go to or could observe in day-to-day transactions when a kid's about ready to come off the rails. I think our kids need more support now than ever. And then stop fooling around with all of the extraneous stuff, and let's get back to educating our children.
Yes.
Let's not worry about pronouns. Let's worry about mathematics.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's their job.
Yeah,
Their
I'll
job
follow
not to
that.
be a parent. Their job not to be a parent. Teach your kids about sex, teach your kids about this or that, A's, B's, and C's.
That's a good
That's it.
time for one more question, and then maybe you can close.
Sure.
Well, I'm sorry, but just to address one thing that you brought up about pissed off people going down to the Portland City Council. I myself have been there with a room full. Okay, post-COVID, because everything's now they want to do it online, whatever. Anyway, post-COVID, room full of people pissed off. Mayor says we're going into private session and walks out. Leaves everybody sitting there. That's what happens. They ignore. I have no idea whatsoever how any of them got elected. I really don't, because I talk to people every day in my business and they go, I didn't vote for him.
Well, they're not educated. That's what the governor can do. What she's talking about, use that platform and educate the citizens. Because we're not educated.
COVID has been a fig leaf over a lack of government transparency.
Oh, yeah.
I despise Zoom meetings too.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I've watched the legislature be particularly abusive. If the chair agrees with you, please take the whole 15 minutes. If the chair doesn't agree with you, 60 seconds, next. So we need to get back to in-person meetings. And it is so contrary to my notion of governance and public engagement and transparency that if the crowd gets a little hot, that you would leave the stage. I feel the same way about legislative walkouts. A mark of leadership is you stay there and you listen, you hear people. I think it's incredibly disrespectful to say, God, I'm a little hot under the collar here, or the audience is, so we're going to adjourn to some ante room and make decisions outside of the public venue. That's not cool. Let's give you the last question.
I was wondering what your stance is on sanctuary city, because a lot of the people that have come into our communities are not prosecuted because we are a sanctuary city. They do the crime and they're immediately released. And I just have experienced this personally myself. And I think that Lents is a haven for a lot of that criminality.
Well, I would call out what I consider the hypocrisy of some of the East Coast sanctuary cities who, when they were confronted with busloads of people, only said, I just right job. I think whoever made the point about, it was okay to dump in Lents.
Yes.
But when it gets dumped into Pearl, it's a different
It's a big
attitude.
deal.
We all wish that wasn't the case, but I think that eventually as more and more neighborhoods come to the table, we're sick of the lawlessness. We're sick of the crime. You call a cop and nothing happens. The guy that I first mentioned, whose wife's purse got stolen, they filed a police report. They haven't heard from the police. It's been 2 days.
And they won't.
Oh, yeah,
and they won't.
Then I
And
can
then it's
pursue
okay.
that.
Why should they? Our police, we've taken everything away from them.
Yep.
I know, I have friends, I'm sorry, I support the police, I love them, I've been in
Absolutely.
downtown Portland. We wouldn't be safe without the police.
Yep.
There are bad apples in everywhere. There are
Yep.
bad apples in politics and every aspect of life. Just because of 1 or 2 police officers, we've taken everything away from them. So why should they respond? My friends tell me, call me on my cell phone if you need anything downtown, because you call 911, we're not coming.
Well, let me just close by contrasting my record of support with the police with Tina and Christine. Showing mugshots. They voted to shield those mugshots. I voted to put them on.
Absolutely.
There are 4 or 5 bills that hobbled the police.
Yes.
And I was a no, and they were yeses. And then the most egregious was the vote about juvenile measure 11 that has now been softened. Tina voted yes, Christine hid, and I stood on the floor closer to the proponent of the bill than I am to you, and voted no because it was lousy policy for a state I love.
Absolutely.
So let's conclude by saying I think they passed out the law enforcement people that are supportive of me. I think Char's got my phone number, and if I've said anything that you think is just boneheaded wrong, she'll give you my number. It's my personal number. I prefer that it not be, widely disseminated. But you can, let's run the questions through Char, and she can call me. If you like what you've heard here today, I would respectfully ask that you consider voting for me.
And spread the word.
And spread the word. You've all got personal platforms, professional platforms, your friends and neighbors. And I would hope that you would consider.
Sorry, can I just mention something
Sure.
just off? Maybe 25 years ago, the topic here probably wouldn't have even been brought up. Question for you, and no disrespect, but I'm not going to say conservative or liberal, but we have 3 people to vote for.
Correct. I hope you only have 1.
Us too.
And I'm just worried about the person winning by default because the 2 other people are going to divide the vote. So have you heard that before?
Oh, of course I have.
And have you thought about it?
Of course I have. I would tell you that if it was only the traditional parties, Tina and Christine, Tina would be measuring the drapes for Mahonia Hall right now. An anti-choice Republican is not going to get elected governor of the state of Oregon that is still left of center and very pro-choice. She's a compelling candidate, but I don't think it's going to happen. And so the fact that I'm in the race offers a place for people to go. I am of the opinion that I'm not of the opinion, I've been informed this by polling and analytics, that there is a huge cohort of people who are sick to death of politics. They hate politics, they hate politicians, and their profile is generally female, a little bit better educated, pro-choice. They like Biden, they are left of center, and they will never vote for a Republican. They don't like Tina. I'm a safe harbor. And so those guys haven't weighed in yet. They vote late, they break late, and while there was a poll out the other day that certainly was disappointing to me, I still think that there's a possibility that I can be your governor if enough people vote for me. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
And
Thank you for coming.
I appreciate not talking about a place, but coming to a place. I think it is terribly educational to cruise around and see what's going on. It makes me a much more informed and authentic advocate for fixing things. You guys have been burdened a long, long time, and I just want you to know I'm standing with you. So thanks.
Thank you.
Cool.